Hello, hello, glad to see you here. On today's video I want to discuss Anathapindika, who was one of the Buddha's most important donors to the early sangha. What I want to ask is who he was, what his story was, give you an idea of what he might have been like and what we might want to know about him. To begin with, his original name was not Anathapindika, it was Sudatta. And Anathapindika is a name, a sort of an epithet given to him, which means somebody who gives alms to the helpless. So he was pretty clearly a very both wealthy and generous donor to many people. Indeed, he was said to be the wealthiest person in Savatthi, the wealthiest business person in Savatthi, which was a town at the time of the Buddha's life, one of the important towns that the Buddha went through at various times. And so what I want to discuss with Anathapindika are three things. First, his importance to Buddhism, to the early development of Buddhism. Second, I want to go over some of what the Buddha said to him. There's obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but there's too much for me to go into in today's video. I could do many videos on that. But just to give a general overview of the kinds of points that the Buddha made in talks with Anathapindika. And third, a look at Anathapindika's death, because I think it highlights an important feature of who he was and his role within Buddhism. First, Anathapindika's importance to early Buddhism. It's said that Anathapindika met the Buddha and was so impressed by him that he decided that he wanted to donate a piece of land to the Buddha where the Buddha and the Buddha's followers, the Sangha, could stay. Because at the time, it seems they didn't really have a place to stay. They simply wandered from place to place, staying in forests and the like, but they didn't have sort of a permanent home, or at least a location that they could make their home during parts of the year. And so what Anathapindika did was to look around, at least this is the story that comes down to us. I don't know how exactly credible this story is of the development, but we'll go with it anyway. This is the story we have. And I'll leave links to some of where I got this material down in the notes. But in any event, he looked around for a plot of land that was near Savatthi where he lived. It had to be close enough, obviously, to Savatthi because he wanted it close to him, but not so close. It shouldn't be within too close where there is too much noise and traffic and hubbub of the town, because of course the Buddha would have wanted something a little bit more far away where things could be quiet and settled, where he could do meditation. And he found a place, indeed a perfect spot, a grove of trees, that was actually owned by Jeta, Prince Jeta, who was the son of the king, son of King Pasenadi at the time. And in order to donate this grove to the Buddha, what Anathapindika had to do was to make a deal with Jeta to buy the grove from him. And so he did for a very large sum of money, because of course Prince Jeta didn't really want to sell it. So he paid a large sum of money to Prince Jeta, and then Jeta decided, presumably he as well was interested in the Buddha. He decided that he would build, just to be nice, he'd build big doors at the front of the grove, and Anathapindika then spent extra money building walls that would attach to the doors and building a number of structures on the site that the Buddhists could use, that the Buddhist Sangha could use. And those, as well as a number of celebrations that were undertaken, were said to have costed something around 54 million gold coins. Now, numbers like these have to be taken with large grains of salt, and so far as I know, during the time of the Buddha, coinage was really not well understood or known in that area. So there is not much discussion of coinage in the early texts. So these may be later interpolations, it's hard to say. But in any event, the major point is that Anathapindika donated an enormous amount of land, as well as houses, buildings, to the early Sangha and made it possible for them to have a location that they could come to during certain parts of the year, where they could be both safe and in a place where they could meditate and have Dharma discussions. Now, second, what are some of the topics that the Buddha had discussions with Anathapindika about? Now, there are a large number of such discussions, so again, I'm not going to be able to go through them in great detail here, but I want to give you a flavor of them. In their chapter about Anathapindika, Nyanaponika and Scherrer, the book where they talk about a number of the Buddha's disciples, I've got a link to it down below, they say that the Buddha's discussions with Anathapindika end up constituting a comprehensive code of lay Buddhist ethics. And much of the material that they discuss, or related material, I get into in my course over at the Online Dharma Institute on work, money, and pleasure, which involves it's a course about the Buddha's discussions with lay people. But in a nutshell here, we'll go through some of the topics that the Buddha would have discussed with Anathapindika. One of them was the benefits of wealth. In other words, the Buddha was not against somebody being wealthy, so long as the wealth was properly attained, properly obtained through hard work, obtained through right livelihood. Many of us will know that one of the stages along the Eightfold Path is right livelihood. That is to say that the way that we make our living should not be involved in harming others and should not be involved in, shall we say, cheating others. But if we make livelihood the right way, then the wealth that we obtain is a benefit to us. And the Buddha discussed with Anathapindika about the benefits of this wealth, that it should be enjoyed, that it should be used to make ourselves happy, to make those around us happy, our family and friends, that it should be donated to worthy people, donated to people in need, as well as donated to people like renunciants, people like the Buddhist Sangha. So indeed, what the Buddha said was that having wealth on its own is not a problem, but that wealth should be made use of. The correct way to use wealth, again, is to spend it in good ways, beneficial ways, ways that make people happy, make the world a better place. The incorrect use of wealth is simply to hoard it, to sort of grasp it as your own and not to do anything with it. Now, the Buddha also talked about how there are sort of basically talked in ways that there's a kind of a gradation of ways that you can use wealth. Any expenditure of wealth that makes people happy is good, and so we shouldn't be thinking of these as unethical and ethical, but rather different ethical ways of using it. So on the lower end, shall we say, it's just spending money to make ourselves and others around us happy. Nothing wrong with it, perfectly ethical, but it's more ethical to donate it to people who are wiser, who are more ethical than we are. And in particular, what the Buddha wanted to say is that the best way, the way that gives us the most benefit, would be to donate the wealth to the Buddha and his Sangha. Now, we might say in a sort of a cynical way that of course the Buddha would say that because he wants the money. I think that is way too cynical. The Buddha certainly was not expecting Anathapindika or anybody to give him all their money. But rather, the general point was that somebody who is particularly ethical and particularly wise is going to know best how to use that money in a way that's helpful to the most people. And we may, I don't know, it depends what we might think in this particular circumstance, but I think the general point is correct, that if we donate money to somebody who is particularly knowledgeable and wise and ethical, they're going to make the best use of it. The Buddha also discussed with Anathapindika the 5 precepts, the 5 famous lay precepts, basically practices that lay people should undertake not to harm, or to harm as little as possible, as well as discussions about the nature of the world, that the world is always changing, that there's nothing to cling on to, that we should not, therefore, indulge ourselves in cravings for things that are in fact unattainable. That we should be concerned with the dangers involved with sensual pleasures because they tend to reel us in and make us cling to them. Now, the third thing I want to discuss here is Anathapindika's passing, because I think it reveals a very crucial and important distinction between what we might call the lay path of practice and a deeper, more profound practice that in general is more the purview of monastics, or we might say professional Buddhist practitioners. So in this story, the story of Anathapindika's passing, Anathapindika is basically on his deathbed. He is sick, in a great deal of pain, and he asks for monastics to come and visit him. And Sāriputta comes to visit along with Ananda, the Buddha's attendant, Sāriputta being the Buddha's right-hand disciple, the one who is claimed to be, or believed to be, the greatest in wisdom, and Ananda, the Buddha's close attendant, who was himself not enlightened at this point. And Sāriputta comes to console Anathapindika and asks how he's doing and says that he hopes he's doing better. And Anathapindika says he's not. He believes that his condition is getting worse and that he's going to die soon. And at this point, Sāriputta could have given him a talk on the benefits of lay ethics, on the benefits of a good rebirth, as sometimes would happen, on recalling our beneficial behavior during our life, on reflecting upon our own good intentions during our life. This way to sort of make us feel happier, make us feel better, in the traditional understanding that we're going to be reborn into a potentially a better life that might enable that. That would be one way that Sāriputta might have gone, but in fact Sāriputta takes an entirely different tack. Instead, Sāriputta gives Anathapindika quite a lengthy talk, on how Anathapindika should resolve to have complete non-attachment to all things perceived or conceived. In other words, whatever he can perceive, all of his sights and sounds and tastes and touches, none of that is who he is. None of that should be something that he has attachment to. He should release attachment to all things, even all thoughts. And one part of this, Sāriputta says, he suggests that Anathapindika think to himself, "I shall not grasp whatever is seen, heard, thought, known, sought, and explored by my mind, and there shall be no consciousness of mine dependent upon that." And having heard this talk, Anathapindika bursts into tears. And Ananda, the Buddha's attendant, and one who is really always conceived of as the compassionate one among the Buddha's close disciples, Ananda asks Anathapindika how he's doing. He says, "Are you dying? Are you are you about to die?" Feeling, I think, compassion for him and worried about him. And Anathapindika says, no, he's not crying because he's about to die. He's crying because he's never heard this talk before. That this is something completely new to him. And Sāriputta says that, yes, this is not a talk that's ordinarily given to lay people. This is the kind of talk that's ordinarily given with monastics. Now, why is that? Well, the reason why Sāriputta says that this kind of talk about non-attachment, complete non-attachment, is not given ordinarily to lay people is because lay people in their ordinary lives are going to be attached to things. They'll be attached to their spouses, perhaps to their children, to their possessions, to their wealth, to their houses, to their cars, to things that they own, and that they're going to be expected, both internally by themselves, by their family, by their friends, by their society, they're going to be expected to not only be attached to these things, but to protect them and preserve them, to fight against people taking them away from them, to protect them with walls and guards, perhaps, if they're very wealthy. And this kind of attitude of attachment to all that surrounds us in our family, our friends, our wealth, is not one that is easily compatible with a practice of complete and global non-attachment to all things. Having heard this reasoning by Sāriputta, Anāthapiṇḍika implores him to give this kind of talk to lay people as well, because Anāthapiṇḍika says, while most lay people won't understand it, some will. Some will be ready to hear this, and that it's worth discussing simply for those few who are willing to hear. So, having had that discussion, Ananda and Sāriputta leave, and Anāthapiṇḍika passes away. Now, I should say that it's because of Anāthapiṇḍika's wish to disseminate this kind of information about non-attachment, and other people's as well, that I discuss these things on this channel, because I think that they're important. They're difficult to practice, maybe not even possible for some of us to practice, but even knowing that they're there may help us at certain times of our lives, perhaps even late on in our lives, as was the case with Anāthapiṇḍika. So let's take this to heart, take Anāthapiṇḍika's life to heart, and if you want to hear more about discussions of non-attachment, I have a playlist on this very subject, and I'll leave a link to it up on the screen. If you're getting something out of these videos of mine, take a look at my Patreon page, which is linked down below. See if you want to help support the channel and get something in return. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you on the next video, and meanwhile, all of you, be well.